Evening. Buyer's remorse. Buy a new car? I'll be moving in. Let's get started.
Sorry, I think there's been a mistake. I bought it from Carvana.
You what?
Yeah, great price. I even have 7 days to love it or return it.
So there's no...
No buyer's remorse. More like buyer's rejoice.
I guess I'll let myself out. Congratulations. I mean it.
Buyer's rejoice. Buy your car today on Carvana.
Limitations and exclusions may apply. See our 7-day return policy at Carvana.com.
The moment a body is found, the clock starts ticking. 48 hours before the trail goes cold. From A&E and Crime House, this is the official podcast from the famous true crime series, The First 48. I'm Carter Roy. Every Thursday, I revisit a landmark homicide investigation in depth with long-form storytelling built for your ears. Listen to and follow The First 48 on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, or wherever you listen to podcasts.
I'm Alice.
And I'm Brett.
And this is the Prosecutors Legal Briefs. Welcome back to the Prosecutors Legal Briefs. I'm your host, Alice, and I'm joined, as always, by my influenced co-host, Brett.
I am under the influence of your great knowledge, Alice. Always.
Much better than driving under the influence.
Right,
you see what I did there?
You should not drive under the influence. You know, it's kind of funny. We have, obviously, listeners from around the world. And the United States, and I actually don't mind this, but the United States, the legal limit under which you can drive is much higher than the rest of the world. Like in most other countries, like if you have a beer, you can't drive. People in foreign countries are always shocked at how liberal our DUI laws
Do you think
are.
it's because we were a nation built on drinking?
Well, there's that. There's that. We drive more and farther than
We really
a
do.
lot of other places. And honestly, I mean, people may disagree with me on this. I don't know. I feel like the vast majority of people can have a glass of wine at dinner and have absolutely no ill effects. They can drive their car. It's not a problem. So I actually think it's a little bit of an over criminalization to have it that strict. And
Wow.
most people who like get into wrecks and kill people or get stopped by the police are like 0.2. I mean,
Right. They're
through the
usually
roof.
not close.
Yeah, it's usually
to
not
the line.
close.
This is true. But I guess there's the argument of if you like even allow, if it were a brighter line rule, maybe there would be fewer DUIs because people knew if alcohol touched your lips, you're not driving that night. Well, we don't know. But, DUIs and your Miranda rights have really been in the news lately. Just, as the fall is approaching with one of your favorite seasons coming up.
True.
And
It's true.
everyone on campus here, I live where the tide is
I
now.
love Bama Rush. I mean, it is one of my favorite times of the year and really excited about it. It's getting
I'm-
started. So
Yeah, that's not what I was talking about, but there's also probably a lot of alcohol during Bama Rush.
that's a good point. That's true.
So real quick aside, because I this is my first season of living through Bama Rush, and I've like sat at so many lights where they're like definitely filming a rush talk, and I just have to sit there. I mean, it's very entertaining, but like it's like happening in front of me, and I'm like, what is real life? And my college days were not that coordinated or that fun.
It wasn't like it is now when I was in college. They did a lot of the same things they do now, but it was the degree to which they do it. Like they've taken it to an entirely different level. Like they still did door songs and they still did all
is
the
some-
rush stuff.
This is
They
like
had bid
a
day.
production from like I don't even think MTV still exists, but this is like the most produced
Seriously.
Like literally, they do hire camera people because they have the whole like, I don't know. The only time I hired someone like that was for my wedding.
Exactly.
To like shoot my wedding, and they're
Well,
like shooting a 20-second rush talk.
Bid day is more important than your wedding day. Let's be clear. I
This
mean,
is
you might
also
get
true.
married several times, but you'll only be a member of one sorority in your life. So, I mean, let's be honest.
I know
Okay.
it seems
This is
like
like
we've
an
been
after
drinking
dark at this
other things than water, but the reason we're talking about this, of course, is what is the DUI law? What happens if you stop and maybe refuse to do the typical breathalyzers and other things that may indicate that you are driving under the influence? Is it all you have to do to say invoke your right to a lawyer, your Miranda rights, and then are you scot-free? Or is it a bit more complex than that?
Yeah, let's talk about this. So let's paint the scene. Imagine, if you will, it's a beautiful summer day, and you decided maybe you'll go play some golf. And of course, you're playing golf. What are you going to be doing? You're going to be drinking. You know, the girl comes by in the cart, and she's got the cooler in the back, and she wants to know if you want a beer or 2 or 12, and you say, absolutely. And it's not like you're doing it every hole or anything. We're not talking 18 beers, but probably more than 1 beer every couple holes. And you get finished. Maybe you have another drink in the clubhouse afterwards because you got to have the 19th hole, right? And now it's time to go home. And what are you going to do? It's not like you can call a cab and leave your truck and your clubs behind at the golf course. The only driver you have is in your bag. It's not like you're a former NFL quarterback or a well-paid NFL analyst or something who could afford to hire someone to drive you around. You're not that kind of person. And you feel fine. So you decide you're just going to strike off.
The weight of my heart is just pun after pun. This is a great start to this legal briefs. But then it happens. Blue lights. You pull over to the side of the road and you brace yourself. It's okay. You got this. I have a pretty face. I can handle this. The cop comes up and says they noticed you swerving. They say that they smell alcohol. Alcohol, you say? Me never. Be that as it may, the officer asks you to step out of the vehicle and consent to some physical tests. Maybe he's just impressed with your physique and your athleticism. He just wants to see what you can do now that he's stopped you. Or maybe he suspects that something has impaired your judgment in driving. And maybe he even asks that you breathe into a breathalyzer. But thank goodness for this dashing, brilliant young man. You listen to the prosecutors and you have an ace up your sleeve. Actually, you say, I'd like to speak to my lawyer. The cop answers with one word. Nope.
So at this point, you're like, well, then I'm refusing the test. You refuse the test, you get arrested, but you're not concerned. You're confident. The cop just violated your rights. Just refused to let you have an attorney during this arrest, even though you have that right under the Constitution. Freedom is at hand. All this evidence is going to get thrown out. Who knows? Maybe you can sue the police department. It's going to be great. That's what you think, at least. But are you right? Okay, so this has come up a couple times in the news lately. I'm sure you're familiar with some of these. Tony Romo was stopped recently, but it had no bearing on our description of the case. And he asked for a lawyer, and he was not allowed to speak to his lawyer before a breathalyzer or a roadside test. There also was a very tragic case in which a woman who was very drunk actually killed a bride, struck, I believe, they were in a golf cart, maybe, and the bride and the groom.
She was going 65
survived.
in like a 25 zone.
Yeah.
It was horrible.
Just the bride was killed. The man survived, but he took a long time for him to recover. She did a similar thing, asked for a lawyer when they were trying to breathalyze her. It was denied. And this led to our favorite TikTok lawyers and Twitter lawyers and everybody else to say, hey, these people's rights are being violated. This is never going to stand up. Surely this is going to go away. And so we thought, what better opportunity to talk about Miranda, arrest, detentions, when Miranda applies, and when you actually have the right to an attorney. So let's start with Miranda versus Arizona. Now, we have talked about this case before, older legal briefs. If you want a full review of Miranda, I'm not going to do the whole thing, but just want to remind you, maybe you're new, maybe you didn't listen to that one. So this is a case from 1966. And in it, the Supreme Court held that the Fifth Amendment's protections against compelled self-incrimination require the police to give certain warnings before interrogating a person in custody. So before questioning begins, the suspect must be told that he has the right to remain silent, that anything he says can be used against him in court, and, importantly for our purposes here, that he has the right to have an attorney present during questioning, and that an attorney will be appointed if he cannot afford one. Now, you might think, okay, you just got pulled over by the police. They're questioning you about your drinking. They're questioning you about whether or not you'll do these tests. Seems like you should be able to have a lawyer. So at this point, if Miranda has attached, and Miranda applies, unless you knowingly, intelligently, and voluntarily waive those rights, anything that happens after that, any statements you give that happen during this interrogation that you're undergoing, generally cannot be used against you. There's some exceptions, but we're not going to worry about those for our purposes today. But there is a very important thing going on here. Remember, and people always get mad at me whenever I say this, but I'm going to say it again. Miranda is made up. It's not in the Constitution. It is a prophylactic rule that the Supreme Court made up so that your right to remain silent, your right to have an attorney would mean something. So we're going to warn you that you have these rights. We're going to make you waive them. And if you don't, then we're going to say your rights were violated and that evidence isn't going to come in. But because they made it up, it was a give and take type thing. They weren't going to apply it to every situation. And as the law has developed, it turns out that Miranda is not triggered merely because someone is suspected of a crime, or even if the police have temporarily detained you. It only applies when two conditions exist at the same time. You're in custody and it's an interrogation.
So this random DUI suspect is good, right? After all, he's in custody, he's been arrested, and he's being interrogated about his alcohol use. Well, no. So let's turn to Berkmer versus McCarty. So here's how the Supreme Court described the facts. After observing the respondent's car weaving in and out of a highway lane, an officer of the Ohio State Highway Patrol forced the respondent to stop and asked him to get out of the car. Sound familiar? Upon noticing that respondent was having difficulty standing, the officer concluded that respondent would be charged with a traffic offense and would not be allowed to leave the scene. But respondent was not told that he would be taken into custody. So that's Berkmer versus McCarty.
And look, this is one of those things that if you're just a lay person, you might think the police pulling me over, like I can't leave. It's not like I can just drive off, like they have me. So I'm under arrest, right? Well, not really. So the court goes on to describe this to say that when respondent could not perform a field sobriety test without falling, the officer asked him if he had been using intoxicants. And he replied that he had consumed 2 beers, because it's always 2. At best, 1 or 2. Usually 2. Always 2. No one ever drinks more than 2 beers, ever, in the history of mankind. No police officer has ever asked a driver, how much have you had to drink? And they said more than 2 drinks. Always. And, just to make it even better, he had also smoked marijuana a short time before. So at this point, the officer arrests the respondent, drives him to the county jail. They do a blood test, and weirdly, it fails to detect any alcohol in his blood. At this point, questioning was then resumed, and he again made some incriminating statements, including an admission that he was, quote unquote, barely under the influence of alcohol. So at no point during this entire sequence was he given the warnings prescribed by Miranda versus Arizona. And he said, from the moment that I was stopped by the police, Miranda had attached. I should have been given my warnings, and everything that I said after that was a violation of my rights and can't come in.
You know that feeling when you finally clean out a junk drawer that's been bothering you for months? That's what switching to Gusto felt like for my business. Payroll, HR benefits, all the admin chaos that has been piling up finally organized into one place. Gusto is online payroll and benefits software built for small businesses. It's all-in-one, remote-friendly, and incredibly easy to use, so you can pay, hire, onboard, and support your team from anywhere. They make it so easy with automatic payroll, tax filing, simple direct deposits, health benefits, commuter benefits, workers' comp, 401k, you name it. Gusto makes it simple and has options for nearly every budget. They also have unlimited payroll runs for one monthly price. No hidden fees, no surprises. Try Gusto today at gusto.com/prosecutors and get 3 months free when you run your first payroll. That's 3 months of free payroll at gusto.com/prosecutors. One more time, gusto.com/prosecutors. Do you ever finish lunch and find yourself reaching for a snack an hour later, or notice cravings take over even when you're trying to eat healthy? That's exactly the problem Pendulum Metabolic Daily was designed to help solve. Pendulum Metabolic Daily is a science-backed probiotic designed to support your body's natural GLP-1 response, help you feel fuller longer, experience fewer cravings, and make it easier to stay on track with your health goals. Just 1 capsule a day with food. Some customers report noticing fewer cravings and more energy in as little as a week, though individual results can vary. Metabolic Daily is a 5-strain probiotic, not just one ingredient doing the work, but a system that supports your metabolism, helps keep your energy steady, and helps cut down on sugar cravings. The key ingredient is Akkermansia, a gut bacterium that helps signal your body to produce more of its natural GLP-1 after eating. That's a hormone that helps regulate appetite and feeling full. Right now, podcast listeners can save up to 48% off their first order at pendulumlife.com/prosecutors. That's pendulumlife.com/prosecutors to save up to 48% off your first order. Again, that's pendulumlife.com/prosecutors and get almost half off today. But what did the Supreme Court say? So the Supreme Court held that roadside questioning of a motorist detained pursuant to a just routine traffic stop does not constitute custodial interrogation for the purposes of the Miranda rule. Although an ordinary traffic stop curtails the freedom of action of the detained motorist and imposes some pressures on the detainee to answer questions, such pressures do not sufficiently impair the detainee's exercise of his privilege against self-incrimination to require that he be warned of his constitutional rights. So, a traffic stop is usually brief, and the motorist expects that while he may be given a citation, in the end, he most likely will be allowed to continue on his way. Moreover, the typical traffic stop is conducted in public, and the atmosphere surrounding it is substantially less police-dominated than that surrounding the kinds of interrogation at issue in Miranda and subsequent cases in which Miranda has been applied. However, if a motorist has been detained pursuant to a traffic stop thereafter is subjected to treatment that renders him in custody for practical purposes, he's entitled to the full panoply of protections prescribed by Miranda. So in other words, it doesn't attach trafficking ones. Those are not custodial for purposes of Miranda. It doesn't mean at some point it can't turn into a situation where Miranda attaches, but it's not automatic that as soon as you stop, from then on out, Miranda attaches.
And so this actually becomes really important. This is the foundational law for not just DUI stops, but any of these kind of encounters. So, if you've ever watched, I always refer to this because I watch it all the time, and it's a great way to watch police in operation. If you've ever watched On Patrol Live, you'll see them. They're always stopping people. They often will tell them, you are detained. You are not under arrest. The smart officers actually say that. This came up all the time when we were prosecutors because the distinction between when you go from detained to arrested really matters for this reason. Before this, you can ask them anything you want. They can ask for a lawyer and you don't have to stop questioning them because Miranda hasn't attached. None of those protections have attached to that person because they're not under arrest. And it's really weird because It's all this sort of like, would they feel like they're under arrest, which never made sense to me, because if the police have me, I feel like I'm under arrest. I do not feel like I can leave because I can't. And in fact, I used to do trainings about this with police officers, and the weird little lines. I mean, and I would ask them, and I'll ask you now, out there listening, if the person is in handcuffs, are they under arrest? Some of you might think, well, yeah, they're in handcuffs. The answer is no, because officers often put people in handcuffs just for officer safety. Say a police officer pulls over a car with 4 people in it, and there's one of them. They may say, look, I'm going to put all y'all in cuffs just because there's 4 of you, there's 1 of me. You're not under arrest. And you're not, even though you're in cuffs. If you're in cuffs and in the back of a police car, most courts have said that's enough. If you're in the back of a police car, but not in handcuffs, some courts have said, no, that's fine. Other courts have said, no, once they put you in the back of the police car, that's enough. You're now under arrest for the purposes of Miranda. I had a trial where this actually became important. There was a point where the officer did put the person in the back of the car, and the statements before then came in. The statements after then were suppressed because the judge decided that at that point they were under arrest, didn't read them the Miranda rights, therefore we have a problem. And if you ever do a suppression hearing, it's always interesting to hear the defense attorneys, the questions they ask. Were you armed? Well, they always are armed. Were you armed? Yes. Did you unbuckle your gun? Because they usually have like a little strap on top of the gun. Sometimes they do, sometimes not. Did you draw your weapon? Did you point your weapon? Because a lot of times officers, if they're sort of walking into a circumstance, will actually go ahead and draw their gun, but they keep it down by their side because they're just ready in case anything happens. And then obviously if you pull your gun and point it at somebody, that's a much more powerful instance of you're possibly in custody. And you would just see this manifest in all these different circumstances. Police are doing, I remember one where police were doing a raid about child pornography, and they're searching the guy's house. He can't leave. He's sitting at the kitchen table with an officer. That officer starts asking him questions. He admits to everything. That became a suppression issue. It was not suppressed. So this becomes really important, not just in the DUI context, but for our purposes, that's how we're talking about it in this context of a DUI. So this also brings up another question, which is another interesting thing that pops up in the law all the time. What about the police officer? This police officer, I don't know if we read this part of the case or not, but it's in the factual discussion about the Supreme Court. This police officer had decided to arrest this person very early on in the process. Now, he had not told them, I'm going to arrest you, but he knew he was going to do it. The question was, is at the point the police officer decides, I'm going to arrest this person, should the police officer give the Miranda warnings? And the answer is no. It doesn't matter. So a police officer's subjective views, decisions, intentions has no bearing on the question whether a suspect is in custody at a particular time. And we've talked about this a lot, the reasonable man standard. What is reasonable? What would a reasonable person think? And in this circumstance, that's what determines it. If a reasonable person would understand themselves to be arrested, then they're arrested. Police officers' subjective thoughts don't matter. And this has also had a huge effect across the board. So traffic stops is a big one because what happens a lot of times? DEA is tracking somebody. They know that the guy in the white sedan with this license plate just bought some drugs from a guy. And they'll call a police officer and they'll say, hey, follow him, find a reason to stop him that doesn't have anything to do with the drugs, and stop him. And then see if you can develop probable cause to search him. So the cop will be waiting. He sees the guy, he pulls him behind him, and basically just follows him until he does something. And there are so many ways to break the law. He drifts over the fog line, which means your wheel goes over the outside line on the interstate. Or like he changes lanes without a signal or whatever. You pull him over, develop probable cause, search the car, find the drugs. And then the fact that this was part of a larger DEA operation never comes in because it had nothing to do with it, because he had independent reason to stop him. Now, he always was going to stop him. But because he was able to develop independent probable cause, his subjective thoughts don't matter. So that comes in a lot as well. So the long and the short of this, and then we're going to give you some not legal advice. So the long and the short of this is, if you're driving your car in, I think, all 50 states, there's something called implied consent. By driving a car, you have already consented to all this stuff, to the tests, to the breathalyzer, everything else. If you refuse it, you're not going to be able to rely on your constitutional rights or anything else. It might help you in the long run, and a lot of attorneys actually do recommend people not take a breathalyzer. But you're going to lose your license because you've already consented to do it, and now the license is going to go away. And frankly, states are making it more and more punitive for not taking the breathalyzer. And I think we'll see what happens with Tony Romo, but he refused the breathalyzer, so he's going to lose his license. And we'll see what happens from a criminal point of view. I was talking for a long time there, Alice. You have anything you wanted to add?
No, I mean, it's just so nice to not be talking about child murders that I'm just really enjoying the discussion.
But yeah. DUIs are really bad.
They are really bad. No, I mean,
one of the leading causes of deaths on the road.
They really are, which is why I mean, truthfully, I do appreciate the rule that we had in college was that bright line rule that I said, like, if alcohol touches your lips, that person's not driving that night, which is a really easy way for young people who may not know their limits and not know exactly what their alcohol level is, especially as a lot of kids are moving into college right now as we speak. That might be a better rule for you. Like, don't even get close to that limit. Drink, just don't drive that night. Call an Uber. Have a designated driver. Make it a thing. Make it a fun thing among your friends. Someone draws the short end of the stick or something like that, but make it a group effort. And if you see someone getting in a car who doesn't look like they should be driving, say something, because you could quite literally be saving their life and someone else's life.
And so, as newly minted defense attorneys, since we're no longer prosecutors, our first piece of advice to you when it comes to DUIs and how to avoid a ticket and going to jail for DUI. First piece of advice is
foolproof.
Foolproof piece of advice.
Foolproof.
Don't drink and drive. I know this is like radical advice, but in today's world, it's pretty easy. I mean, even if you live out in the middle of nowhere, it's pretty easy to figure out some way to drive safely. And it is so incredibly dangerous. And look, I knew a guy once who got into an accident after he'd been drinking, and everyone agreed that the alcohol had nothing to do with it. Like, just the way the accident happened, the alcohol didn't really have anything to do with it. But he was drunk. Now, he didn't get as harsh a charge as he would have if the alcohol had been directly responsible. But the fact that he was drunk driving, was in an accident, and someone was seriously injured, still led to serious criminal charges for him. And I actually think even in that case, like, the other guy ran into him or something. It was like a wild sort of set of facts. So just something to remember. You are just putting everything at risk when you do this, and there's no reason to do it. And I'm always stunned whenever I see these people who have tons of resources that do it. It's like, why is Tiger Woods driving around under any circumstance where,
like, in general, why does he even not have a driver? Just in general, even when he's not drinking.
All right. So that's the first thing. Now, the second thing is, I'm going to say this is for if you seriously have only had a couple beers, because here's the thing. If you're like at 0.2 or 0.18 or something like that, there's nothing you can do. Number one, they're going to know you're drunk. Number two, it's going to be obvious you're drunk. They're going to be obvious on the body cam. You're just in trouble. But let's imagine a scenario in which you've had 3 beers, which for some people would put them pretty close to 0.08. For some of us would probably be more like 0.02 or something. But nevertheless, let's just say that. And you get in a situation like this. I don't know what your laws are in your state, so I'm not going to give you legal advice. A couple things, though, and one thing that I think is always pretty interesting. There are a lot of states, and I think it's important to know this if you live in the state, where a roadside DUI test, including a breathalyzer, is not actually admissible in court. And if you're in one of those states, do it. Do it all. And why do you do it all? Number one, it's not admissible. Number two, you might pass. Number three, every second that you're out there doing the test, doing the breathalyzer, is one more second that your body is processing alcohol. And when it comes to this, time is on your side. because your body's processing alcohol. Going back to the station and taking the one at the station, which frankly, I think you should always request under any circumstances, just because the roadside ones, I used to do these cases.
They're not calibrated.
They're not calibrated.
They're not
very
calibrated.
well.
So think about like your thermometer even, right? Like thermometers are wildly different. And so this is just like thrown into someone's backseat. It's not calibrated. That's why it's not admissible, because you don't know if someone's been rejiggered, it hasn't been set, it's not been factory set, had low battery, all these things, right? And there's high variability when you're talking about like decimal points.
And so however much time it takes to actually do it is more time you have. And frankly, if that's not enough time for you to be,
then you really shouldn't have been driving.
You really shouldn't have been driving. So, what's the point anyway? But that's just, time is on your side. And that's something that you can always remember. People have mentioned blood draws. Just while we're talking about this, it used to be the police could just draw your blood. Now they have to get a court order. And some jurisdictions are much better at getting a court order than others. Some have it set up. It's like, oh, you don't want to consent to a blood draw?
Almost like
pick up the phone, boom.
Like judge has the order, they just go for it.
Yeah, they just do it. So some jurisdictions are like that, but others are not. And so, if you can get in a circumstance where you're like requesting a blood draw or something, maybe that's a little bit better for you.
You're listening to this podcast, so I know you've got a curious mind. Here's a helpful fact you might not know yet. Drivers who switch and save with Progressive save over $900 on average. They make it super simple. Pop over to Progressive.com, answer some questions, and you'll get a quick quote with coverage options tailored to your choices. Plus, you'll see which discounts you may qualify for, like the online quote discount or savings for paying in full. In fact, 99% of Progressive Auto customers earn at least one discount. See if you could save when you switch to Progressive. You'll feel good about making a savvy choice. Visit Progressive.com and see if you can enjoy a little extra cash back. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. National average 12-month savings of $946 by new customers surveyed who saved with Progressive between June 2024 and May 2025. Potential savings will vary. Running a business means you're always reachable until you're not. And the moment you miss that call, that text, that follow-up, a competitor is the one that picks it up. That's why today's episode is brought to you by Quo, spelled Quo, the business phone system built so you never miss an opportunity. All your calls, texts, and voicemails live in one place, so anyone on your team can pick up a conversation, see the full history, and respond fast. That's why Quo is the #1 rated business phone system on G2, trusted by over 90,000 businesses who rely on it to stay reachable and look professional every day. And you can set it up in minutes on any device. Keep your existing number and add teammates as you grow. No IT, no hassle. Money is on the line. Always say hello with Quo. Try Quo for free. Plus, get 20% off your first 6 months when you go to quo.com/prosecutors. That's QUO.com/prosecutors. Think about it almost like, when you're like running from the zombie and you just like throw chairs along the way. Like, it's not really going to stop the zombie, but it could slow them down. Right? That's how I view it, is like buying yourself a little bit more time. Although I don't feel great morally about letting how public people get off.
I'm not trying. I'm not. Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. That's why rule number 1 was don't do it.
Don't do it. That's foolproof.
I'm just in that very narrow circumstance where maybe you're an innocent person who's getting roped into something. These are just thoughts that you can consider as you are dealing with what is probably the worst day of your life at this point, which is another reason. Don't put yourself in that circumstance. So there you go. That's the law about DUI. From now on, when you see people on TikTok and on Twitter and everything talking about asking for a lawyer, and they said he couldn't have a lawyer and that violated his rights, now you know why that's not true. And you also can apply that to many different circumstances, because this comes up all the time. It comes up all the time. When are you in custody? When are you arrested? When are you just detained? These are the kinds of distinctions that make huge differences for your rights and what you can expect to happen in trial.
I feel like we can finally answer some questions because we've been recording so long. So, like, if you don't know,
It's just funny because 30 minutes feels like nothing.
Nothing when this was supposed to be the length of a legal brief anyway. So if you leave a 5-star review, you can ask any question you want. It's not the only way you can talk to us. But yes, of course, we love your reviews and we love your questions. It doesn't have to be about true crime. So let us know what you think about this episode. Let us know what you want to hear about on legal briefs as well. And let's answer some questions, Brett.
Let's answer some questions. Okay. Someone wants to know if we have any recorded court appearances. That's from Pandemonium. So we practice in the federal system. There are no cameras in the federal courtroom. Now, you can go listen to my oral arguments on the 11th Circuit website. So if you want to hear oral arguments, you can go to the 11th Circuit and find those. But yeah. And I mean, we talked about this before. Are cameras in the courtroom good or bad? Like, it's nice in certain circumstances. I'm glad we're getting to see the Lindsay Clancy trial. I'm glad we're getting to see the evidence come in. People are able to weigh the actual evidence. I feel like at the end of the day, not being able to do that in Delphi has allowed a lot of misinformation to bloom. But then you see something like Karen Reed, and you're like, gosh, is this worth it? So, I don't know. I don't know if you have thoughts on that, Alice, or if you care one way or the other.
This, I don't know. I think it's really hard. I obviously love access to the courts, but I do think when anyone can be a quote unquote journalist or a reporter, and there's so many just misinformation and people who are not used to being in the spotlight, which is most people. Like, I don't think these prosecutors are typically on YouTube all the time, for example, the defense counsel, the judge, not to mention the jurors knowing that this is being live streamed and all the witnesses who know that everyone's watching what they're saying. It does have an effect on every single person, and it affects people differently. So it's not like you can just say, oh, everyone's going to be more blank. I don't know. But when we're talking about someone's life, any kind of deviation from the best course of action at getting at truth makes me want to be cautious about that method. So that's my lawyerly non-answer.
That's a good answer. Leah wants to know when you can do the Some of the Dude Did It defense. We did legal briefs on that.
Oh,
so you can check that out.
It's a great Saudi. It's a great episode. I liked it.
Basically, you got to have like a viable argument that someone else
has to be rooted in
could have done
something. You can't just throw spaghetti at the wall and be like, it could be a Yeti. Like, well, you got to have something more than just, it could be a Yeti.
I mean, you can always question whether the police looked enough at other possible suspects, if that makes sense. Like, you can always ask an officer, you can always do the whole, well, you zoomed in on him immediately, didn't you? You were tunnel vision. You didn't even look for other. You can always do that. But when you want to start saying it was that guy, when you want to start doing that, then you have to have a much better basis in fact to be able to do that, because the evidence rules prevent you from presenting evidence that can be confusing to the jury. And one thing that's confusing to the jury is bringing in a third party and blaming them without any real evidence that they did it. And I've talked about this. I had a case once where they actually wanted to say this other guy did it, but he was on a helicopter in the Army at the time, so he couldn't have done it. Like, he literally couldn't have done it. And they were like, well, maybe he hired somebody. It's like the Murdaugh thing. Well, maybe the midgets did it, right? Like, that was essentially what they did. And the judge was like, do you have any evidence that he hired somebody? It's like, no, but you never know, was basically what they said. Of course, that was kept out. So, okay. I'll see if you even agree with me on this. And if you do, you can answer this question first and then I'll answer it. So Charles wants to know, why don't you like engineers on a jury? I've said before that I don't like engineers on juries.
So I'm maybe not as strict on that rule. And all of these, you're just trying to make quick decisions because you quite literally have seconds, if not a minute, to decide if someone's going to be a good juror for you. So these are like broad strokes that you're painting with. An engineer's mind typically is very methodical. It's math oriented. Nothing deviates from that. You don't want anyone to deviate how you build a bridge, right? This is the way you build a bridge. This is what physics says. There's a reason an engineer follows specific rules and never deviates. The law is really more of an art than a science. And so each side is trying to convince you of something that is not a math problem. And so an engineer, painting with broad strokes here, tends to be someone who is less likely to move off of the exact show me the evidence, 2 + 2 always equals 4. Lindsay Clancy is a great example. When a person says, I used my hands and killed my child, how does that not equal guilty? Right? So that's why we're having a whole trial, because it is not a math problem. There's many things at play. Mental health, which is not a math equation. And so that's why you may hear a lot of lawyers say, oh, if I see an engineer, I strike them on my jury, because of the way they think, which is fantastic for building bridges. Less good if you're an advocate trying to persuade someone something that is unable to be written down on a board like a math proof.
Yes. I mean, that's it. We talked about this before. The standard beyond a reasonable doubt is also not mathematic. It is amorphous, and it's unique to each person. And it's described that way to the jury. You know, each individual juror is supposed to think about beyond a reasonable doubt means the amount of certainty you would have when you're making the most important decisions in your life. How certain do you have to be comfortable making the most important decisions in your life? That's different for everybody. I mean, that is a little vague. And engineers, once again, this thing about jury selection, we're going to have 50 engineers write in and say, they don't like this at all.
And
the
that's
thing
very
about jury
possible.
selection,
Very
it's 100% possible. But the thing about jury selection is you're basically always stereotyping people, because you're picking based on stereotypes, and it burns you sometimes.
Totally.
Like you like, oh, that guy was a sheriff's deputy for 40 years. I want him on my jury. And the defense is like, we got to strike that guy, but we're out of strike. So no. And then it turns out that sheriff's deputy is completely cynical about cops, knows they don't lie all the time. Exactly. He saw all the bad stuff. Well, I'm not saying cops lie all the time, but I'm saying that that's his position, right? Based on what he saw. And then he ends up burning you because you made a decision based on the stereotype. Same thing with the engineers. You're concerned about someone who requires that much mathematical precision or is used to mathematical precision in making really important decisions. You want people who more kind of go with their gut a little bit. That's basically what you want, because you're never going to have mathematical precision unless you got some like easy peasy DNA case with a guy on camera or something, which these days, what am I even talking about? These days, Brian Koberger's innocent and Tyler Robinson's a plant. And I mean, who knows, right? So maybe we need more engineers on there. Maybe we should change to actually be for engineers in the hopes that they won't give in to these crazy conspiracy theories. Maybe engineers, I don't know if this is true, but maybe engineers are less likely, less susceptible to conspiracy theories. I don't know. All right. Well, that was fun. And as Alice said, leave us a 5-star review, send us a question, and we will attempt to answer it as best we can on one of these episodes.
And if you're interested in watching these early and ad-free, you get to see our faces recording these. You can join Patreon. But everything we record on Patreon is eventually available for free for everybody on all podcast platforms. You can find us on all the social medias at Prosecutors Pod. You can email us at prosecutorspod@gmail.com. And thank you guys for following along with us. This is I feel like we've recorded every day for 3 weeks straight. So it's been great seeing you, Brett, every day. It's been really fun to actually chat with all of you guys as well. But until next time, I'm Alice.
And I'm Brett.
And this is the Prosecutors Legal Briefs. Okay, do you want to know about the shirt? I'm very proud
I
of
do.
it.
I've been wondering about it this whole time.
Okay, I don't know if you can see the back. This is
I
a
can't
nickname.
see the back.
I'm
actually.
about to show you
No.
the back. I have to explain it first.
Sorry.
Come on. So you're about to learn. I don't even think you know this. Y'all are about to learn a nickname that I don't think many people know. Okay, so it says, if you can read it, it says the Eliminator.
The Eliminator. Okay.
So it was speaking of Adnan and AIM, Ulysses was my AIM.
Hello, and welcome to Pluto Phone. If you know the name of the movie you'd like to see, just stream it for free on Pluto TV, where all your blockbuster favorites are landing all summer long. Catch Anchorman, The Legend of Ron Burgundy.
Fantastic.
The Matrix Trilogy.
Welcome to the real world.
Mean Girls.
Shut up!
Titanic.
I'm the king of the world.
And so much more. For showtimes, press nothing. They're free 24/7.
That is so fetch.
On Pluto TV. Stream now, pay never.